All right, Joellen, let's talk about iris, all right?
Beautiful
and
iris.
iris is the state flower.
Iris is the state
How about
flower.
that? It's the
Yes,
state
they
flower.
do very well here.
Yes, they are beautiful. So why don't you tell us about iris?
Yeah, they are very regal blooms
Yeah,
in
beautiful.
the spring, and May is their major month that they bloom here in our area. But you know, some of them do rebloom and will bloom again in the fall. And this one here that's blue and white, it is one of the varieties that I have that reblooms again in the fall.
Huh, okay.
So there are a
Didn't know
few
that.
of those out there that will rebloom again in the fall, but they put on the best show in the spring.
Well done. Yeah.
But they do. And of course, iris is a Greek word that means rainbow.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Of course, the Greek goddess of the rainbow is called Iris.
How
So
about that?
that's interesting. And of course, some people think that it refers to the many colors in the rainbow that iris represents. So that's why they are called iris as a genus. And of course, there are over 200 species around the world of iris. So you know, they all look similar because they have one thing in common is how their flowers are formed. As you see, they have the three outer leaves that are called falls because they seem to fall down. And then there are three petals on the inside that stand up, and they're called standards. So when they describe them, they describe the color of the falls and the color of the standards. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different.
Okay.
And so, of course, these beautiful flowers have inspired the French royalty to use them as their fleur de, in their fleur de lis, starting in the Middle Ages.
Wow.
And so you saw iris on coins and shields and their coat of arms. So, and of course, Van Gogh painted his favorite, his iris painting is very famous. So iris have been around for a long time, and through the centuries, the colors have started meaning things. Like the purple here is noted for royalty and wisdom.
Wisdom. All right.
And the blue here is noted for faith and hope. And yellow, of course, is known for passion. And I don't have a white one, but a white one is for purity.
Okay.
So some of the colors have meanings with them over the years. And of course, iris is the month of February's flower. And so, and the 25th anniversary flower is the iris also.
How about that? Okay.
So of course, our state of Tennessee, and it's funny, I moved here from Illinois, and of course the soils here in Tennessee are very different from the soils in Illinois, let alone the climate.
Right.
And so my mother brought along iris, and she had them in little bags, and we had a little area of dirt, and of course, this didn't look like the dirt we were used to.
Right.
So my mother said, well, they're either going to die in these bags or they're going to die in this soil. So we planted them. But you know what? They did better than they ever did in Illinois because they love the soil here. And then we found out it was the state flower, and we're like, oh, well. And you can just literally throw some of these rhizomes on the ground, and they'll root and take root and live.
That's good.
So they love our soils here, and they do very well in Tennessee. And there's a lot of different kinds, and we're going to go over some of them. First, we have the iris cristata, the dwarf crested iris. It is only 3 to 6 inches tall.
That's all?
Yeah, it's very short. It's one of the first to bloom in the spring too. But it usually they sell the bulbs or the rhizomes in the fall, and you plant them in the fall, and they come and bloom in the spring. And they will naturalize because they are native to this part of the country.
Okay.
And in fact, they are native up to Ohio too, and in the South, Midwest, and Southeast. And of course, if they find the right place, they will multiply and get bigger and larger clumps of them in the same area.
Oh, okay.
And so they're usually in the blue family and lavenders and things like that. They of course like sun and well-drained soil.
Well-drained soil.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And as we go through the iris, you'll notice some like well-drained, and some are drought tolerant, and some like wet areas.
Oh, wow, okay.
But this one likes well-drained soil. Next is the iris hybrida, the Louisiana iris, also native to the South. and to the Mississippi Valley from Ohio on down. So they have very large, showy flowers, but they're going to be tall, like 2 to 3 feet tall.
Wow. Okay. Pretty
They
good
will
size.
also bloom later in the spring. Very airy, easy to care for, and because of the ease of care of the Louisiana iris, they are very popular all around the world.
Oh.
So they like sun again,
Wow.
moist but well-drained soil.
Moist.
So they
but
can
well
get
drained.
wet, but then they like to dry out before they get wet again.
Right.
So they like to have well-drained soil, but they're really not particular about soil type. So that's why they are very popular for many countries and besides us here, and they're native. They're native for us.
Yeah, they work here. Right.
They're native for us.
Okay.
And of course, there are a few others. There's the Iris pseudochorus and the Iris versicolor. That's the yellow flag and the blue flag iris, and both of them like wet conditions. You can put them near ponds, and they aren't particular about their rhizomes being out exposed.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
And then there's the Siberian iris, which is native to Europe and Central Asia. Caesar's brother is probably the most famous blue of that.
Okay.
It's 2 to 3 feet tall. And of course, the Iris tectorum, the roof iris. And it's called roof iris because it's native to Japan and to China, where it used to live on thatched roofs in that country.
Damn, okay.
But it can take a lot of drought. You can think about it on a roof.
Right.
So, and next is the bearded iris, Iris hybrida, the bearded iris.
Okay.
This is what most people think of when they think of iris, but there are many other kinds. They bloom in the spring, and it's best to divide them in July, August, and September. And you want to wait to reestablish them. You want to give them at least 4 to 6 weeks to reestablish in the soil before the frost comes.
Okay.
So that's why they said those 3 months are good for dividing them. What happens is they'll bloom, and then where they're sitting, they're going to get energy to bloom again. Then you cut them off and divide them, and then they'll be more likely to bloom wherever you're planting them.
Okay. I got you.
And of course
Makes
you want to get a large. You want to set them about 12 inches apart. Here's one I've dug up, and the larger area you have for the rhizome, the more likely it's going to bloom the next year. Like this one came off of it also. But this rhizome is not much rhizome left. There's some roots. This will still grow.
Okay.
But there's not much This probably will not bloom the first year. It'll have to produce a better rhizome to be able to bloom. And when you
Pretty good root system.
pretty good root system. And this one's the rhizomes are all different sizes. This happens to be a much larger one. And you'll notice the roots are on the bottom. And that's what you plant in the soil.
Okay.
But you really want this exposed because they like to have sun on the rhizome, for the bearded iris especially.
Okay.
A lot of the other iris you don't have to, but for the bearded you do.
Okay.
And if you are going to plant these, say you divide this and you see how large this is, well, it's already got the energy that it needs in July, in August, and September for blooms next year. So you want to cut off this foliage.
Look at that. Okay.
Because you're going to plant this in the ground, and if you go to the Iris Society website, they've got a really good picture of this. But it's nice to build up a little small area, and you see the roots get spread out all over it, and then you just can cover it up, just the roots.
And that one likes well-drained soils, right?
This likes well-drained soil, and it likes that rhizome exposed.
To be exposed, okay.
But you see how the roots were all fanned out? And it sits there, but it's not sitting. Well, sometimes you can get landscape fabric, pins, or just some kind of wire, and you can stick it down here and anchor it so it'll stay and get rooted, and then in a few months, in a few weeks, you can just take the stakes out, and it'll be rooted there.
Okay. Wow, how about that?
But try to keep the rhizome exposed.
Has to be exposed. Okay.
And a lot of times,
how much watering then?
well, you're going to have to water this when because the roots are very new and on the very top of the surface. So you want to make sure you water it and keep it moist.
Keep it moist. Okay.
But don't keep it wet. But just moist, and until it gets rooted. And then you can take the wires off, and then you'll have another one. And you're supposed to space them about 12 inches apart because they will get very crowded.
Okay. Before we have to end, any major diseases or insect pests we need to be concerned about?
No major diseases or
That's
pests
good.
with it. None.
Beautiful plants.
Gorgeous.
Thanks, Joellen. Yeah, it's a state flower.
State flower.
All right, we appreciate that good information. The beautiful plants, which are yours, right?
Those are mine.
Hey, good job, good job. Thank you much.
Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. To find out more information on this topic, just click on the familyplotgarden.com link in the description.